Until European navigators from Portugal and Spain, of course explorers as well, begin to land on the shores of South America. These navigators and explorers claimed the land for themselves and their kings and quickly enslaved the native inhabitants. Spain and Portugal, the two greatest European maritime and military powers of the 15th century, actually quarrel, almost go to war over the lands of the New World. And these two kingdoms, Spain and Portugal, appeal to the Vatican, Pope Alexander VI, to arbitrate their claims. So the Pope, Alexander VI, a Spanish Borgia Pope, who is very rich, swings the election to the papal throne via countless bribes, basically divides the newfound lands, divides the Americas, by drawing a line on a map. The Portuguese will have everything east of the line, and the Spanish will have everything west of the line. Alexander VI, the Spanish Borgia Pope, is perhaps the most notorious example of corruption among the Renaissance-era pontiffs. The Pope had, numerous mistresses and illegitimate children, and he distinctly favors Spain. This paves the way for future missionary activities in the Americas. The Borgia Pope, in fact, favors Spain, his native country, so much that a year later, in 1494, Alexander VI moves the line on the map 270 degrees to the west, providing Spain with an even bigger advantage in the New World. The Borgia Pope needs the military and naval power of Spain at his side, since the pontiff's rule is full of diplomatic difficulties. In fact, the Papal States are seething with constant intrigue. And the Muslim Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman Turks, are a constant threat and menace to all of Europe, especially the Vatican. The Portuguese, at this point in time, are convinced that they have located the legendary blessed island of Celtic myth, High Brazil, which means the island of the blessed in Gaelic. This is a legendary land in which there is no sorrow, no old age, and no death. And the Portuguese decide to name their newly discovered lands after the semicircular mythological island High Brazil, that, according to legend, resembles two halves of a walnut. The Spanish, however, continued to venture into the Amazon region, regardless of the Vatican's boundary lines. By 1524, Spain and Portugal are about to go to war over the New World again, when Pope Clement VII, the bastard grandson of Lorenzo de' Medici, upholds the previous boundary lines established by Pope Alexander VI. Pope Clement VII also sets up a system of hereditary captaincies in Brazil, placing the region firmly under the control of the Portuguese. Then the Pope, who is a scholar and patron of the arts, spends most of his time increasing the treasures of the Vatican Library and refortifying Rome. Pope or no Pope, the Spanish conquistadors continued to venture into Brazil, regardless of any Vatican treaty or stipulation. For example, in 1541, Francisco de Orellana, as far as we know, is the first non-native to descend the Amazon River and plunge into the rainforest. Orellana hopes to find the legendary kingdom of El Dorado, whose ruler was said to coat his body in gold dust and then wash it off in the waters of a sacred lake. The Orellana expedition soon transforms from a quest for gold to a quest for survival, as the men are reduced to eating their leather belts and the soles of their shoes, which are cooked with herbs. They also have to fight every Indian tribe that they encounter. Orellana loses a dozen men to starvation, and many others to poisonous arrows. And the expedition returns, telling startling tales of dense jungles, deadly poisons, and a tribe of vicious warrior women. A Dominican friar during the course of the expedition chronicles everything. He writes everything down, including the fact that the women go around naked with bows and arrows in hand. Orellana calls these women Amazons, after the famed warrior women of Greek mythology, who it is said removed their right breast so that they could shoot a bow and arrow more effectively. Now, the word Amazon is derived from the Greek Amazos, which means no breast. Now, 3 years later, Orellana tries once again, this time losing 175 men to Indian attacks and starvation. The Spanish conquistador finally dies himself, his body and soul crushed and exhausted by the collapse of his ambitions and dreams. Now, 13 years later, another Spanish expedition hits the rainforest. This is Pedro de Ursa, who also decides to set sail on the lookout to find the fabled land of El Dorado. Ursa, however, makes the fatal mistake of hiring Lope de Aguirre. Aguirre heads a mutiny and murders Ursa while Ursa is sleeping in his hammock. Then Aguirre installs another man, Fernando de Guzman, as the new commander. Aguirre then murders Guzman, shooting him at point-blank range with a heavy matchlock pistol. Aguirre then takes command and tears through the rainforest regions of what is now Venezuela, ransacking towns and villages, raping women, and killing just about anything he sees. The Spanish finally hunt down Aguirre in Peru in late October 1561. His own men shoot him dead. Aguirre is then beheaded, and his body is carved up and tossed into the rainforest jungle. After Aguirre, few European outsiders disturbed the Amazon's native population, basically over the next 200 years. But the Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch, and French fight war after war in Europe. These wars are in part for the control of Brazil's great mineral wealth, Brazil's precious gold and diamonds, not to mention its sugar and coffee crops. And by the mid-18th century, things change dramatically and disastrously for the Amazonian native population. When a French naturalist, Charles Marie de la Condamine, while traveling down the Amazon River from Ecuador